The great hall of Zentara Prime Academy buzzed with nervous energy as students from dozens of worlds gathered for the morning announcement. Professor Kethver stood at the center stage, his blue crystalline form catching the light from three different suns streaming through the massive windows. His voice echoed through the chamber with the authority that came from teaching galactic studies for over 2 centuries. Today we begin the most dangerous field study program in Academy history, Professor Kethver announced, watching as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward him with mixture of excitement and fear. 4 brave students will travel to a world so hostile that our Galactic Council has classified it as uninhabitable by civilized standards. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Every student knew about the Hellworlds scattered throughout the galaxy, planets where the environment itself seemed designed to destroy life. Most species avoided such places entirely, leaving them as monuments to the universe's cruelty. This world is known as Earth, the professor continued, pulling up a holographic display that showed a blue and green sphere spinning slowly in space. It orbits dangerously close to a violent star that bombards the surface with deadly radiation. The atmosphere contains poisonous gases, and the weather systems are so chaotic that they regularly destroy entire regions. Zixara raised one of her crystalline appendages from the front row. As a silicoid from the high-radiation world of Quartzheim, she was naturally curious about extreme environments. Her body was composed of living crystal that could withstand temperatures and radiation levels that would instantly kill most organic life forms. "Professor, if this world is so dangerous, how do we know anything lives there at all?" she asked, her voice ringing like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Professor Kethver smiled, an expression that looked strange on his angular features. "That is exactly what makes this study so fascinating. Not only does life exist on Earth, but it thrives. The dominant species calls itself human, and they have somehow not just survived, but built a complex civilization on this hell world." In the third row, Gloop shifted his gelatinous mass with interest. The Hydrazoan had evolved in the crushing depths of Aquanus, where pressure that would flatten most beings was simply normal life. His translucent blue body rippled as he processed this information through his distributed nervous system. "How is such a thing possible?" Gloop gurgled, his voice bubbling up from somewhere deep within his fluid form. "Our studies show that civilized life requires stable environments with predictable resources." "That is what you 4 will discover," Professor Kethver replied, gesturing toward the selected students. "Zixara, Gloop, Thorak, and Wisp, you have been chosen because your species represent some of the most resilient life forms in known space." Thorak hissed softly from his position near the back of the hall. The massive saurid stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled hide scarred from the volcanic ash storms of his homeworld Pyros. His species had evolved to handle extreme heat and toxic atmospheres, making them natural explorers of harsh environments. "What do we know about these humans?" Thorak rumbled, his voice carrying the bass notes that came from a chest cavity designed to process superheated gases. The holographic display shifted to show images captured by long-range surveillance drones. The assembled students gasped as they saw the creatures that somehow ruled this hell world. The humans appeared impossibly fragile, thin skin with no natural armor, small teeth with no venom sacs, and limbs that looked like they would snap under the slightest pressure. Wisp drifted closer to the display, her energy form shimmering with curiosity. As a being of pure electromagnetic force from the gas giant rings of Nimbus, she existed in a state that most solid creatures couldn't even comprehend. "They look so weak," she whispered, her voice crackling like distant lightning. "How do they survive without proper energy shields or phase abilities?" "That is the mystery," Professor Kethver explained. "Every analysis suggests these humans should have been extinct millions of cycles ago. Yet they not only survive but have spread across their entire planet. They build cities and regions where our environmental suits would fail, and they reproduce at rates that suggest they face no significant survival pressure." The professor activated another section of the display, showing various Earth environments. Desert regions where the temperature would boil most alien blood, Frozen wastelands where the cold would shatter crystalline beings like Zixara, and dense jungles filled with what appeared to be hostile plant and animal life. Your mission is simple in concept but dangerous in execution, Professor Kethver continued. You will live among a human family for one full rotation cycle. You will observe their daily survival routines, document their adaptation methods, and most importantly, discover how such apparently fragile beings have conquered such a hostile world. Gloop raised a pseudopod in question. What safety measures will be in place? Our life support systems are designed for normal planetary conditions, not Hellworld environments. You will each be equipped with the most advanced environmental suits. Our technology can provide, the professor assured them. However, based on our limited data, you may find that the humans themselves provide the best examples of how to survive on their world. The 4 selected students exchanged glances, each processing the magnitude of what they were about to undertake. They had trained for years to explore dangerous worlds, but this mission was different. They weren't just visiting a hostile environment. They were going to live alongside beings who had somehow made such an environment their home. Your transport leaves in 3 standard hours, Professor Kethver announced. You will be accompanied by Dr. Nelvin, our xenobiology specialist, who will monitor your health throughout the mission. Remember, this is not just a field study. It is potentially the most important research project in galactic history. As the assembly dispersed, the 4 chosen students gathered near the transport bay to review their mission parameters one final time. Their equipment included advanced translation devices, environmental monitoring systems, and emergency beacon transmitters that could call for immediate evacuation if needed. I still cannot understand how such weak creatures survive, Thoric muttered, checking his thermal regulation systems. Perhaps they live underground or in artificial environments. We will discover the truth soon enough, Zixara replied, her crystalline form refracting the light as she moved. Whatever their secret, it must be remarkable. The transport ship waited in the bay, sleek and silver against the star field visible through the launch portal. Soon they would be traveling to a world that defied everything they understood about life and survival. None of them could imagine that their greatest challenge would not be surviving Earth's hostile environment, but understanding how beings they considered impossibly fragile had turned that hostility into their greatest strength. The alien students stood on the front porch of a simple house in what the humans called suburbia, staring in confusion at their new temporary home. Dr. Nelvin had departed after ensuring their translation devices worked properly, leaving them with strict instructions to observe and document everything. The house before them looked nothing like the fortified survival bunkers they had expected to find on a Hellworld. Lisa Martinez opened the front door with a warm smile, her movements casual and unguarded in a way that seemed impossible for someone living in constant danger. She was a small human female with brown hair and kind eyes, wearing clothes that offered no protection against environmental hazards. Behind her stood her mate Greg, equally relaxed, and 2 smaller humans they called children. "Welcome to our home," Lisa said, gesturing for them to enter. "I'm Lisa, this is my husband Greg, and our kids Danny and Katie." The aliens exchanged worried glances as they followed the family inside. The dwelling had thin walls that would never withstand an acid storm, windows that provided no radiation shielding, and doorways that couldn't be sealed against toxic atmospheric intrusions. Yet the humans moved through this inadequate shelter as if it provided perfect safety. "You must be hungry after your long journey," Greg said, leading them toward what he called the kitchen. "Lisa made her famous pancakes this morning." In the kitchen, the aliens watched in horror as the humans began their morning feeding ritual. Lisa poured a dark liquid from a heated container into small cups, and the aliens' environmental sensors immediately detected dangerous alkaloids in concentrations that would be lethal to most known species. "Coffee," Lisa explained, noticing. "They're staring. Would you like some?" Gloop's gelatinous form rippled with alarm as Greg consumed the toxic substance without any apparent concern. That liquid contains enough caffeine to stop the cardiovascular systems of 12 different species, He gurgled quietly to his companions. The situation became worse when Katie began spreading a red paste on her food. Zixar's crystalline sensors detected capsaicin levels that registered as chemical warfare agents. Child unit, she chimed urgently. You are consuming what appears to be a contact poison. Katie giggled, a sound that somehow conveyed both innocence and complete lack of survival instinct. It's just hot sauce, she said, taking another bite. I like spicy food. Danny joined them at the table, adding white crystals to his orange liquid that the aliens recognized as concentrated citric acid. Want some orange juice, he offered. Mom got the kind with extra vitamin C. Thorax thermal sensors detected that the citric acid concentration was sufficient to dissolve metal plating, yet this young human was voluntarily ingesting it as if it were nourishment rather than industrial solvent. How do your internal systems neutralize such corrosive substances? He asked carefully. What do you mean? Danny replied, looking genuinely confused. It's just breakfast. After the meal, Lisa announced she was going for her morning run and invited the aliens to join her. They followed her outside, expecting to witness some kind of emergency evacuation drill or patrol for threats. Instead, Lisa simply began moving. At a steady pace through the neighborhood streets, within the first few minutes, the aliens realized they were observing something extraordinary. Lisa maintained a consistent speed that their analysis suggested she could continue for extended periods. Her breathing remained steady, her movements efficient, and she showed no signs of fatigue even as they traveled several kilometers. How long can she maintain this pace? Wisp asked Dr. Nelvin through their communication link. Unknown, came the reply. Her energy output suggests she could continue for several more hours. Gloop began to lag behind despite his advanced propulsion systems. This is impossible, he transmitted to the others. She is demonstrating the movement patterns of a persistence predator. The concept sent chills through all four aliens. Persistence. Predation was one of the most feared hunting strategies in the galaxy, the ability to pursue prey relentlessly until it collapsed from exhaustion. Only the most dangerous species had ever evolved such capabilities. When they returned to the house, a large four-legged creature bounded toward them with apparent aggressive intent. The aliens prepared their defensive systems, but Danny dropped to the ground and began wrestling with the beast as if this were normal behavior. This is Max, Danny explained, laughing as the creature licked his face with what appeared to be a chemical-covered appendage. He's our dog, Thorax studied the animal with growing unease. The creature showed all the characteristics of a pack predator, powerful jaw muscles, sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh, and eyes positioned for depth perception during hunts. You keep a domesticated apex predator as a companion animal, he observed. He's just a golden retriever, Katie said, joining the wrestling match. He wouldn't hurt anyone. The aliens watched in fascination as the humans interacted with their pet predator. The relationship demonstrated a level of confidence and dominance that suggested these seemingly fragile beings were far more dangerous than they appeared later. That morning, Greg announced he was going to the gym and invited them to observe human exercise routines. The aliens expected to see survival training or combat preparation, but what they witnessed was far more disturbing. Humans voluntarily subjected themselves to activities that appeared designed to cause physical damage. They lifted heavy objects repeatedly until their muscle fibers began to tear, ran on machines that went nowhere while their cardiovascular systems operated at dangerous stress levels, and performed movements that deliberately strained their skeletal structures. This appears to be ritualized self-harm, Zixara transmitted privately to her companions. Why would they deliberately damage their own bodies? A human male on a nearby machine was lifting metal weights that would have been challenging for Thorax enhanced strength. Sweat poured from the human's skin as he pushed his body beyond what should have been safe limits, yet he showed no signs of stopping. It makes us stronger, the human explained when Gloop asked about the purpose. You have to break down muscle tissue so it grows back tougher. The concept was revolutionary. These humans had discovered that controlled damage could improve their physical capabilities. They were literally evolving themselves through voluntary trauma. becoming more resilient with each session of self-imposed stress. That afternoon, the aliens accompanied Danny and Katie to what humans called school. They expected to find some kind of survival training facility where young humans learned to cope with their hostile environment. Instead, they discovered something even more remarkable. In chemistry class, teenage humans casually handled substances that would dissolve most alien exoskeletons. They mixed acids and bases with the confidence of trained hazardous material specialists, treating potentially lethal chemical reactions as routine learning exercises. "Safety goggles are required," the teacher announced, as if thin plastic barriers were adequate protection against industrial chemicals. During physical education, the aliens watched human children engage in activities that could only be described as combat training. They threw projectiles at each other with accuracy that suggested natural weapons capability, engaged in territorial competitions that involved strategic thinking and coordinated group tactics, and demonstrated reflexes that seemed impossibly phospho beings without enhanced nervous systems. "These games teach valuable life skills," the instructor explained when Wisp asked about the purpose. "Teamwork, strategy, physical fitness, and competitive spirit." By evening, the aliens had filled their data storage systems with observations that challenged everything they thought they knew about survival and evolution. These humans didn't just endure their Hellworld environment, they had transformed themselves into beings capable of thriving in conditions that would destroy most galactic civilizations. As they prepared for sleep in the Martinez family guest room, the four aliens huddled together to process what they had learned. The humans had consumed toxins as nutrition, engaged in self-harm as improvement, domesticated predators as companions, and trained their young in combat techniques disguised as education. "We have made a terrible error in our assumptions," Thorak rumbled quietly. "These are not weak beings struggling to survive. They are apex predators who have learned to use their environment as a weapon against anyone foolish enough to challenge them." The others could only agree as they settled in for the night, wondering what other revelations tomorrow would bring. The third day of their stay began with an ominous change in the atmospheric conditions that had the aliens checking their environmental sensors every few minutes. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon with a speed that defied normal meteorological patterns, and their instruments detected massive electrical buildups in the upper atmosphere that registered as dangerous even by Hellworld standards. "A storm system is approaching," Zixara announced, her crystalline form reflecting the strange green tint that had appeared in the sky. "Energy readings suggest electromagnetic discharges equivalent to planetary defense systems." Gloop rippled nervously as he monitored the barometric pressure changes through his distributed sensory network. "Atmospheric pressure is dropping at rates that would cause structural failure on most civilized worlds," he gurgled. "We should begin emergency evacuation procedures immediately." The aliens gathered their emergency equipment and prepared to signal Dr. Nelvin for immediate extraction. But the Martinez family seemed completely unconcerned by the approaching environmental catastrophe. Lisa was preparing lunch in the kitchen, while Greg worked in what he called his home office, and the children continued their normal activities as if nothing unusual was happening. "Excuse me," Thorak addressed Greg, his massive form blocking the doorway. "Our sensors indicate a severe weather event approaching. Should we not seek shelter in underground facilities or activate emergency shields?" Greg looked up from his computer screen with mild confusion. "Oh, you mean the thunderstorm," he said, glancing toward the darkening windows. "Yeah, it looks like it might be a good one. The weather service said there could be some strong winds and heavy rain." The casual way Greg described what their instruments classified as a natural disaster left the aliens speechless. Strong winds and heavy rain were massive understatements for the atmospheric violence building outside their inadequate shelter. "Perhaps your people have developed immunity to electromagnetic radiation," Wisp suggested, her energy form crackling with anxiety as she detected the first traces of static discharge in the air. "Our species would require extensive shielding to survive direct lightning exposure." Lisa entered the room carrying a tray of sandwiches, seeming genuinely puzzled by their concern. Lightning is dangerous if you're outside during a storm, she said, but we're perfectly safe inside the house. The kids love watching storms from the living room windows. The aliens exchanged horrified glances. These humans planned to observe a deadly electrical storm through transparent barriers that offered no protection whatsoever. Their children were treating the approaching disaster as entertainment rather than a threat to their survival. As the first drops of rain began to fall, the aliens' instruments went haywire. The precipitation contained trace amounts of industrial pollutants that would be considered toxic waste on most worlds. Yet humans routinely expose themselves to such contamination without protective suits or decontamination protocols. The wind began to pick up, and the aliens watched in amazement as the supposedly fragile human dwelling withstood forces that would have flattened most temporary structures. The house creaked and swayed but showed no signs of catastrophic failure, as if it had been specifically designed to endure regular punishment from hostile weather systems. How often do such storms occur? Zixara asked, trying to understand how any civilization could function under constant threat of atmospheric violence. Oh, we get good thunderstorms pretty regularly during spring and summer, Danny replied, settling onto the couch with obvious anticipation. Sometimes we get really awesome ones with lots of lightning and thunder. The word awesome in this context disturbed the aliens greatly. Danny was expressing positive emotions about a phenomenon that should inspire terror and immediate flight. Responses. Either these humans had completely defective survival instincts, or they possessed capabilities that made them immune to dangers that would devastate other species. When the storm reached full intensity, the aliens huddled together in the center of the living room while the Martinez family spread out near the windows to get better views of the atmospheric chaos. Lightning bolts struck with the force of orbital bombardment weapons, illuminating the sky with energy discharges that would have powered small cities. "Look at that one," Katie exclaimed as a particularly massive bolt split the darkness. It was so bright it hurt my eyes. The fact that Katie was staring directly at electromagnetic discharges powerful enough to cause permanent retinal damage, yet only complained of minor discomfort, suggested human sensory systems were far more robust than any previous analysis had indicated. The thunder followed each lightning strike with sound waves powerful enough to shatter crystalline formations, yet the humans showed no signs of acoustic trauma. They simply continued their conversations, occasionally pausing to comment on particularly impressive displays of natural violence. "The sound waves alone should cause internal hemorrhaging," Gloop transmitted privately to his companions. "How are they not suffering organ damage from these pressure fluctuations?" The rain intensified into what the humans casually called a downpour, but which registered on alien instruments as a liquid bombardment capable of eroding unprotected surfaces. Water poured from the sky with enough force to flatten vegetation and create instant flood conditions, yet the humans seemed to consider this normal weather variation. A warning tone echoed from the living room television, and the aliens prepared for emergency evacuation announcements. Instead, they heard a calm human voice describing something called a tornado watch, as if discussing routine scheduling information. "Atmospheric conditions are favorable for the development of rotating wind systems," the voice explained. "Residents should be prepared to take shelter if warnings are issued for their area." Thorax thermal sensors nearly overloaded as he processed this information. "They are describing atmospheric vortices capable of destroying entire settlements," he rumbled in disbelief. "Yet they speak of them as routine weather possibilities." "Tornadoes are pretty rare around here," Greg said, noticing their agitation. "We've only had a few come through the area in the 20 years we've lived here. Usually they just cause some property damage and knock down trees." The aliens stared at him in shock. Greg was describing planetary-scale destruction events as minor inconveniences that occurred with acceptable frequency. These humans had normalized catastrophic weather phenomena to the point where they built permanent settlements in regions regularly swept by atmospheric disasters, as if summoned by their conversation. The warning tone sounded again, this time announcing a tornado warning for their immediate area. The aliens activated their emergency protocols and prepared for immediate evacuation. But the Martinez family simply moved away from the windows and gathered in what they called the basement. "This is just a precaution," Lisa explained as they settled into the underground room. "Tornadoes usually pass by pretty quickly." The aliens crowded into the cramped space, monitoring their instruments as wind speeds above ground reached levels that would strip flesh from bones. The house shook and groaned under the assault, but the humans remained remarkably calm, even playing simple games to pass the time. "How do you maintain such composure while under attack by atmospheric weapons?" Wisp asked, her energy form flickering with nervous energy. "It's just weather," Danny replied, as if this explained everything. "You learn to deal with it." 20 minutes later, the tornado passed without directly striking their location, and the family emerged from the basement to assess any damage. The aliens followed, expecting to find a devastated landscape, but discovered only scattered debris and a few downed tree branches. "Looks like we got lucky," Greg observed, picking up pieces of torn vegetation from his yard. "Just some minor cleanup to do." As the storm moved away, the aliens watched human neighbors emerge from their own shelters and begin the process of clearing storm debris. No one seemed traumatized by the near-death experience they had just endured. Children splashed happily in the standing water that would have been considered hazardous waste on most worlds, treating the aftermath of potential annihilation as an opportunity for recreation. "I believe we have discovered why Earth is classified as a hellworld," Zixara transmitted to her companions as they observed the humans' casual response to surviving what should have been a civilization-ending event. "It is not because the environment is hostile," Thoric agreed. "It is because the inhabitants have become so adapted to constant danger that they no longer recognize threats that would destroy most galactic civilizations." As evening fell and the Martinez family resumed their normal activities as if nothing unusual had happened, the aliens began to understand that they were not just visiting a dangerous world. They were observing beings who had been forged by the danger into something far more resilient than anyone in the galaxy had imagined possible. The accident happened so quickly that even the aliens' enhanced reflexes couldn't prevent it. Katie was helping Lisa prepare dinner when the knife she was using to slice vegetables slipped and opened a gash across her palm. The bright red liquid that immediately began flowing from the wound sent all 4 alien visitors into panic mode as their sensors detected massive cellular damage and potential system failure. "Medical emergency," Zixara chimed urgently, her crystalline form flashing. Warning colors. "The juvenile has sustained critical tissue damage with significant fluid loss." Gloop immediately began extending pseudopods toward Katie, preparing to initiate emergency cellular repair protocols that his species used in life-threatening situations. "We must begin immediate regeneration procedures or she will enter system. Shut down within minutes." But the Martinez family's response baffled the aliens completely. Instead of activating emergency medical systems or calling for evacuation, Lisa simply wrapped Katie's hand in a clean cloth and announced they would go to the hospital to get it looked at. "This injury requires immediate surgical intervention and tissue reconstruction," Thoric rumbled, his massive form radiating heat as his stress responses activated. "How can you remain so calm when the offspring is bleeding out?" "It's just a cut," Katie said, wincing slightly but showing no signs of the terror that should accompany such massive trauma. "It hurts, but I'm okay." The aliens stared in amazement. Not only was Katie conscious and functional despite what appeared to be catastrophic tissue damage, but she was able to communicate normally and even walk to the family vehicle without assistance. Her entire species seemed to possess recovery capabilities that defied known biological limitations. At the hospital emergency room, the aliens expected to witness advanced trauma protocols designed for beings who regularly suffered environmental injuries on a hell world. Instead, they found a facility that seemed almost casual in its approach to what they considered life-threatening emergencies. Dr. Amanda Chan, the emergency physician who examined Katie's wound, treated the injury with a competence that suggested such damage was routine rather than exceptional. She cleaned the cut with substances that would have dissolved most alien tissue, applied adhesive strips to hold the wound closed, and administered what she called a tetanus shot without any apparent concern for the patient's survival. "The cut isn't deep enough to require stitches," Dr. Chun explained to the worried aliens. "It should heal completely in about a week with proper care." Wisp's energy form flickered with confusion. "You are saying this level of tissue damage will repair itself without technological intervention," she crackled. "The human body is remarkably good at healing minor injuries," Dr. Chen replied, beginning to clean up her medical supplies. "Katie's young and healthy, so her natural healing processes should take care of this easily." While they waited for Katie's paperwork to be completed, the aliens observed the emergency room with growing amazement. Humans arrived with injuries that would have been instantly fatal to most species. Yet the medical staff treated these cases as routine problems with established solutions. A construction worker came in with what appeared to be severe burns from industrial chemicals, yet he was walking under his own power and complaining more about missing work than about his injuries. A young male arrived with obvious bone fractures from what humans called sports, yet he seemed more concerned about his team's performance than his own structural damage. "How do your people survive such regular trauma?" Gloop gurgled to Dr. Chun as they watched the steady stream of injured humans receive treatment. "We're pretty resilient," she replied matter-of-factly. "The human body can survive quite a lot of damage and still function. We've also developed good medical techniques for dealing with common injuries." Dr. Chun led them on an impromptu tour of the hospital, explaining human medical practices with the casual confidence of someone who dealt with Hellworld trauma every day. In the surgery wing, they observed procedures that would have been considered torture by most galactic standards. "We removed damaged organs and replaced them with artificial ones or transplants from other humans," Dr. Chun explained as they watched surgeons working on a patient through an observation window. "Sometimes we have to cut people open to fix problems inside their bodies." The concept of voluntary surgery horrified the aliens. These humans deliberately inflicted massive trauma on their own species as a form of healing, cutting through multiple tissue layers to access internal systems that were never meant to be exposed to environmental conditions. "The patient survives this level of invasive damage?" Thorak asked, his thermal sensors detecting the massive temperature and pressure changes involved in the surgical process. "Most of the time," Dr. Chun replied. "Modern surgery has very high success rates, and patients usually recover completely within a few weeks or months." In the pediatric ward, they encountered something even more disturbing. Young humans were undergoing treatments that involved deliberately introducing weakened pathogens into their systems, exposing them to controlled doses of radiation, and consuming chemical compounds that would have been classified as industrial toxins on most worlds. "This is called chemotherapy," Dr. Chun explained as they observed a child receiving intravenous medication. "We use controlled toxins to fight diseases like cancer. It's hard on the body, but it often saves lives." A human child no older than Katie was sitting calmly while medical staff pumped his system full of substances that registered as deadly poisons on the alien sensors. Yet the child was alert, communicating normally, and even seemed to be enjoying the entertainment provided by a wall-mounted display screen. "How does his system not shut down from toxic overload?" Zixara chimed, her crystalline form pulsing with distress signals. "Kids are tough," Dr. Chun said with obvious affection for her young patients. "They bounce back from treatments that would be much harder on adults. Their natural resilience helps them fight off diseases that would have been fatal just a few decades ago." The aliens learned that humans routinely donated parts of themselves to save other humans, sharing organs, blood, and tissue as if their bodies were modular systems designed for component exchange. The concept of voluntary organ donation existed nowhere else in known galactic civilization. "You allow surgical removal of functional organs while you are still alive," Wisp crackled in disbelief. "People donate kidneys, partial livers, bone marrow, and other tissues to help family members or even strangers," Dr. Chun confirmed. It's considered one of the most generous gifts you can give. In the trauma unit, they witnessed the true scope of human durability. Patients arrived with injuries that would have been instantly fatal to most species, massive blood loss that would have drained a hydrozoan completely, bone fractures that would have shattered a silicoid's crystalline structure, and organ damage that would have shut down a saurid's thermal regulation systems, yet human medical teams routinely saved lives under conditions that would have overwhelmed most civilizations' capabilities. They transfused blood from other humans to replace massive losses, used mechanical devices to maintain circulation and breathing when natural systems failed, and performed complex repairs on damaged organs while patients remained unconscious but alive. Your species has developed medical technology specifically designed to counter the extreme trauma of living on a hell world, Thoric observed as they watched emergency teams work on multiple critical patients simultaneously. We've learned to fix most of what goes wrong with the human body, Dr. Chun agreed. This planet throws a lot of challenges at us. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Katie's hand properly bandaged and healing already begun. The aliens realized they had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. These humans had not just adapted to survive on their hell world. They had developed medical capabilities that allowed them to recover from trauma that would destroy most known life forms. The injury is already beginning to heal, Katie announced, proudly flexing her fingers carefully. Dr. Chun said I can take the bandage off in a few days. The aliens stared at her in amazement. In the space of a few hours, Katie had sustained major tissue damage, received medical treatment that would have been considered extreme intervention by galactic standards, and was already showing signs of recovery that suggested complete healing. Within days rather than the months or years such trauma would require for most species. As they drove home through the night, the aliens began to understand that Earth's classification as a hell world had created beings whose capabilities extended far beyond simple environmental adaptation. These humans had evolved medical knowledge and physical resilience that made them nearly indestructible by normal galactic standards, turning their planet's hostility into an advantage that no other species possessed. On their final day with the Martinez family, the aliens expected a quiet conclusion to their field study, perhaps some time to organize their observations and prepare their departure reports. Instead, Greg announced they would be going camping in the mountains for what he cheerfully described as a fun family weekend in nature. The aliens exchanged worried glances as they loaded into the family vehicle along with supplies that seemed inadequate for survival in what their preliminary scans indicated was a hostile wilderness environment. Their instruments detected dangerous radiation levels from the nearby star, temperature fluctuations that would challenge their environmental suits, and atmospheric conditions that registered as barely breathable by galactic standards. Are we not concerned about the predatory life forms in this region? Thoric rumbled as they drove through increasingly wild terrain. Our scans indicate the presence of large carnivorous animals and venomous plant species. Oh, we might see some bears or mountain lions, Lisa replied casually, but they usually avoid people. We'll store our food properly so we don't attract any unwanted visitors. The concept that humans voluntarily entered territories controlled by apex predators for recreational purposes suggested either complete insanity or capabilities far beyond what the aliens had yet observed. Bears and mountain lions were classification level, threats that most species would require military support to engage safely when they reached the campsite. The aliens watched in fascination as the Martinez family began setting up what appeared to be temporary shelters made of thin fabric. These structures offered no protection against environmental hazards, predator attacks, or atmospheric variations, yet the humans seemed completely confident in their adequacy. These dwellings will not withstand even minor weather disturbances, Zixara observed, her crystalline form reflecting the filtered sunlight that penetrated the forest canopy. How do they provide adequate protection for overnight survival? They're just tents, Danny explained, hammering stakes into the ground with practiced efficiency. We're not expecting any bad weather, and it's pretty warm for this time of year. The aliens noted that Danny's definition of warm corresponded to temperatures that would require thermal regulation systems for most species, while his casual dismissal of weather concerns ignored the fact that they were now completely exposed to atmospheric conditions with no backup systems or emergency shelters. As evening approached, Greg began gathering wood for what he called a campfire. The aliens watched in amazement as he created an uncontrolled combustion reaction in the center of their temporary settlement, deliberately igniting organic materials to produce heat and light. "Your species harnesses open flame as a survival tool," Wisp crackled with something approaching awe. "Most civilizations require extensive safety protocols for fire management. Humans have been using fire for hundreds of thousands of years," Greg replied, carefully arranging logs to maintain the burning process. "It's one of our oldest technologies." The revelation that humans had mastered controlled combustion before developing space travel suggested an entirely different evolutionary path than any other known species. Most civilizations discovered fire as a laboratory curiosity long after achieving advanced technology, but humans had somehow weaponized it during their primitive development phases. As darkness fell, the alien sensors detected movement in the surrounding forest that indicated the presence of large predatory animals. Their threat assessment systems activated, preparing defensive measures against what appeared to be coordinated pack hunters approaching their location. "Multiple large life forms are converging on our position," Gloop gurgled urgently. "We should activate emergency extraction protocols immediately." The Martinez family showed no signs of concern as they gathered around their controlled fire, preparing food over the open flames and sharing stories as if they were not surrounded by creatures that could kill them in seconds. Their casual behavior in the face of obvious predator activity defied every survival instinct known to galactic civilization. "Those are probably just deer or elk moving through the area," Katie said, noticing the aliens' agitation. "They're herbivores, so they won't bother us unless we get too close to their babies." The aliens recalibrated their sensors and realized Katie was correct. The large animals moving through the forest were indeed herbivorous species, but the ease with which she had identified them by sound alone suggested sensory capabilities and environmental awareness that most species required technological enhancement to achieve. Around the campfire, Greg began sharing stories of human history that painted a picture of species-wide survival challenges that no other civilization had ever faced. He described ice ages that lasted thousands of years, volcanic eruptions that blocked sunlight for decades, and asteroid impacts that destroyed most life on the planet. "Every human alive today is descended from survivors," Greg explained, poking at the fire with a stick to adjust the flame patterns. "Our ancestors lived through events that wiped out most other species on Earth." Thoric processed this information with growing unease. "Your people evolved during planetary extinction events," he rumbled. "Most species would have been eliminated by such catastrophic environmental changes." "That's probably why we're so adaptable," Lisa added, roasting what appeared to be sugar-based nutrients over the open fire. "We come from a long line of beings who learned to survive when everything around them was trying to kill them." Danny demonstrated techniques for identifying edible plants in the wilderness, pointing out species that provided nutrition and warning about others that contained toxins. The fact that humans had cataloged the survival properties of their environment's flora suggested they had been forced to adapt to resource scarcity on a regular basis. "This plant makes good tea," he explained, showing them leaves that registered as mildly psychoactive compounds on their sensors. "But these berries will make you really sick, so you have to be careful." Katie added her own knowledge about finding clean water sources, building emergency shelters, and starting fires without modern tools. These children possessed survival skills that would challenge trained military specialists from most galactic civilizations. Yet they treated such knowledge as basic education rather than advanced combat training. As the night progressed, the aliens began to understand that they were not just visiting a hellworld, they were observing beings who had been shaped by that world into something unprecedented in galactic history. Every human was essentially a survivor of conditions that would have destroyed most species, carrying genetic memories of catastrophic events and environmental challenges that had forged them into ultimate adaptation machines. We have made a fundamental error in our assessment, Zixara transmitted privately to her companions as they watched the Martinez family sleep peacefully in their inadequate shelters while surrounded by dangers that should have required constant vigilance. They are not weak beings struggling to survive on a hell world, Thoric agreed. They are apex survivors who have conquered their hell world so completely that they no longer recognize conditions that would be lethal to most galactic civilizations. When morning came, the aliens helped pack up the campsite and return to civilization, but their understanding of humanity had been permanently altered. These beings didn't just live on a hell world. They had transformed themselves into living weapons, capable of thriving in any environment the universe could present. As they prepared for departure, Dr. Nelvin arrived to collect them and review their preliminary findings. The 4 students spent hours uploading their observations and sensor data, trying to explain what they had discovered during their week among humans. Our initial assessment was completely incorrect, Gloop reported during their debriefing session. Earth is not classified as a hell world because it is uninhabitable. It is classified as a hell world because it produced inhabitants who are essentially indestructible by normal galactic standards. Their final report to the Academy would recommend extreme caution for any species considering contact with humans. Not because humans were malicious or aggressive, but because they literally could not comprehend that most galactic civilizations considered their normal living conditions to be unsurvivable. They consume toxins as nutrition, engage in self-harm. As improvement, domesticate predators as companions, and treat environmental disasters as minor inconveniences, Wisp summarized in her section of the report. Any species unprepared for such capabilities could be overwhelmed by simple cultural exchange. As their transport ship lifted off from Earth's surface, the 4 aliens looked back at the blue and green world that had challenged everything they thought they knew about life and survival. They carried with them a new understanding of what it meant to be human, and a quiet concern about what these remarkable beings might accomplish. When they inevitably spread beyond their solar system, the humans they left behind continued their daily lives, unaware that they had fundamentally changed how 4 alien species viewed the possibilities of evolution and adaptation. To the Martinez family, it had simply been a week of showing interesting visitors around their perfectly normal world, never realizing they had demonstrated capabilities